On August 3rd, Koei Tecmo announced that they would be having a DLC for Dynasty Warriors Origins, as well as a remaster of one of the older titles of Dynasty Warriors. This news got us all real excited for it, due to just our love of Dynasty Warriors. With the remaster, we haven't heard much more about it. People are speculating that it'll be Dynasty Warriors 3, 4, or 5. But I'm more interested right now about the DLC that is coming for Dynasty Warriors Origins. Dynasty Warriors Origins is an interesting game that follows about the first third of the story of the Romance of the Three Kingdoms, to the point of everyone fighting at the Battle of Chibi. And I want to speculate today about what the DLC could entail, what we could potentially get in the future, as well as what I would love to see in a DLC for Dynasty Warriors Origin. So the Nintendo Direct on September 12th, I would like to say, came out and had a little teaser, a little snippet of the Dynasty Warriors Origins DLC, which showed Zhan Jiao turning to the camera and holding a hand out to us. And what I've seen for this is memes of Jesus wants your money, he's asking for money, and blah, blah, blah. But it also implies that we'll be getting a hypothetical route for at least the Yellow Turban. And what I think we have, for the most part, is that it's going to be a hypothetical route, or the hypotheticals. I think that Koei Tecmo would be wise to make it so that this is a banger of a DLC, that they focus as much as possible on just one of the factions, and then potentially release more hypotheticals in the future for the other routes. But if this is the only DLC that we're getting, I personally would love to see 4 hypothetical. And I think there is a slight likelihood, or a potential for a couple of other hypotheticals that they could do if they really wanted to, but we'll talk about those a little bit later in the video. So, with Dynasty Warriors Origins, there are the factions of Wei Wu and Shu, and those are the ones that are in the base game that have their routes and then their hypotheticals. So there's 6 routes for the game that follow basically the same track. All of them go to the Battle of Chibi. I think that there is a likelihood in this DLC for us to get the Yellow Turbans, which if we do get the Yellow Turbans, I think that it would make sense for us to get companions as well as weapons in this DLC that are the generic weapons within the game. There are 4 generics, I believe, within the game. There's the fan, the throwing knives, the club, and I think there was a 4th one, but I don't remember what that is right now. So with that, I think that it would be interesting if for the DLC we get a couple of the weapons, and then potentially get a companion as well for the Yellow Turbans. And I can only think of one person that is a unique model, at least, that we would get a companion for, which would be Zhuo Kang, the guy who was super obsessed with Guan Yu's beard. I think it would be really interesting if we ended up getting Zhang Zhao's brothers as companions instead, but they're not unique modeled characters, so I don't see it as likely right now for us to get those guys. If we did, though, a couple of interesting things they could do if they wanted to save money on assets and such, potentially use their older models and just like polish them up to the level of Dynasty Warriors Origins, and replace the models for Zhang Bao and Zhang Liang with previous versions of Zhang Zhao to show that they are brothers, as well as to show that they're more of the zealot people who are leading the cult astray, really. Because if you look at it in most of the games, the person who dies first is Zhang Zhao, because I think he had a head illness of some sort that I think he aneurized in the actual history and story, whereas the other 2 stayed around for a little bit longer. But it makes a lot of sense if we want to have it so that he's kind of the last one standing for Zhang Zhao, that you have the brothers kind of take on a role where, like, potentially they look like the previous versions of Zhang Zhao and have a little bit more of that zealotry, since we're going for Hot Man Zhang Zhao. You could have the 8 version with the triangle / square head for hair, where he's got like the star points. You could have the crescent moon version from 9 as the other brother. I think that would be fun, as well as it would give a little bit more flair to the game. But like, that's what I think Yellow Turbans we would get. And then I think what their route would really be would be Zhang Zhao struggling with the Yellow Turbans because of how many people and how many walks of lives they have under their command, how really divided they are as a force. Hence why there's banditry and everything. And it would be a lot more internal, so you would fight those major battles probably from the point of the volunteer army. You would potentially have it so that you find Zhang Zhao at the beginning of the game, and then you are fighting Yellow Turbans for a little bit to align them all to the same thoughts of Zhang Zhao. Because it seems like everyone believes incredibly in Zhang Zhao, but they all disagree on the methods of what he is doing in the story that we have. And it seems like he's led astray because he had too many people too fast. So I think it would be interesting if you potentially fight some of his officers to put them back into their place, and then have it so that you are fighting the volunteer forces as well as the other forces of like Wei, Shu, Wu, and the Deng Zhuo's force and everything, and potentially beating them back so that there is stability within the realm of the Yellow Turbans, which would be more of the northern China rather than southern China. and potentially fighting the breakaways like the wave bandits and such, and stopping them from really banditry in general, because their whole thing is they're just starving peasants who want to like do better, but they're kind of forced into this horrible way of life. I think that would be an interesting path to take for the Yellow Turbans. A potential hypothetical for that, for like the good ending, would be like you jump over and start like taking over parts of like the court to potentially fight the eunuchs and take control of the emperor, so the Yellow Turbans do get legitimized or something. You could do that, or you could have it so that like for the normal route, I think that the normal route for each of these, it would be interesting if at the end you're forced to betray your lord and join another faction, and that like then makes it so that potentially Wei Wu and Shu gain strength earlier on. So like with Yellow Turbans, I think it would make sense if you are forced to lose for your normal route, you're forced to join the Shu faction and potentially gain a couple of the people from the Yellow Turbans into Shu, so they gain another hypothetical on top of the Chibi, where they gain some extra people there or something. For the other hypotheticals that I think would be really cool for us to get, but I don't know if we're going to get them in this DLC or if we'll get them at all, I think the from most interesting and most likely to least likely and potentially least interesting, I would go for Lu Bu hypothetical, a Dong Zhuo hypothetical, a Yuan Shao hypothetical, a Yuan Shu hypothetical, and a Wang Yu hypothetical. So with a Lu Bu one, I think that companion characters that it would make sense and would be interesting. You could potentially get Chen Gong as your companion that you can fight alongside with. Since Lu Bu is already a character who you can fight in free play with, you could potentially have it so that Deo Chan does join you at that point, because she does like you, and also if you are joining the person who avenged her father, potentially that would convince her to stay along, and potentially having it so that you end up, when you are defeated, you have to choose between Wei and Shu to join which faction if you've lost in the the normal route where they lose at Xiapi Castle still. Having it so you're forced to choose between Cao Cao and Liu Bei, and like whoever joins with you, you could potentially have Chen Gong then rejoin Cao Cao or join Shu, because he's just like, I will never work for Cao Cao kind of thing. And I think that would be really interesting. You could have some fun dynamics with that, where that hypothetical would be interesting, with the potential for you to have it. So it's like, okay, now we've gained Chen Gong, who's another strategist, on the side of Liu Bei, and a little bit more of a morally ambiguous one. So potentially he foresees some things like Shu Shu's mother and grabbing her, so that way the Shu Shu can join you. And then you have it so that the Battle of Chibi, you have a lot of strategists who all know things, and you could have some interesting stuff with fire attack and other potential methods of attack for Cao Cao. Potentially earlier battles trying to prevent a big clash like the Chibi. I think that would be really interesting and a really fun way to do that. With the Dong Zhuo one, I think that the companion would be probably Hua Shang. Hua Shang, my man, poor guy, got a really interesting moment in Dynasty Warriors 8 Extreme Legends where you save him and then he reciprocates for the Lu Bu hypothetical, but then he gets his unique model in Dynasty Warriors 9, has a terrible short story, which has one of the coolest moments, I think, in all of Dynasty Warriors 9, but Dynasty Warriors 9 is a critically panned game that I think justifiably got the hate that it got. Hua Shang, for that one, he ends up having a moment where Dong Bai, the new character who is Dong Zhuo's granddaughter, gives him a cup of wine, which is a warmed cup of wine, which is supposed to be this thing that raises morale and everything. And he's like, I'm going to go back to the battlefield. It'll be warm by the time I come back. And then she waits there until the drink freezes over. And the implication is he lost his duel with Guan Yu and ends up dying. So it's a cool parallel storytelling moment with the whole stuff with the legend of Guan Yu killing Hua Shang, and it's stuck in one of the worst games of Dynasty Warriors, if not the worst Dynasty Warriors game. And then you have it so in this game you have him have two cutscenes with Zhan Jiao, one battle that you get to participate with him, which is you fighting, I think it's called the Liang province, the one next to Zili province. And it's against the Ma clan, and you end up having it so if you don't help him, he ends up retreating the battle because he sucks. And then the next time you see him is when you're killing him at Shishui Gate in a mandatory duel. So it's just like, oof, he just gets no moment. He is the jobber to make it so that he builds yours or Guan Yu's legend. And it's just so sad. So like having him as a companion for Dong Zhuo, and potentially being able to save him for Dong Zhuo to then have a successful route, because then he has a warrior, maybe not on par with Lu Bu, but someone who can hold Lu Bu off for a minute if Lu Bu was going to try and murder Dong Zhuo. It would be nice to have it so he doesn't just freaking die. You could potentially also have Jia Chu as another companion for Dong Zhuo. And as I said, his hypothetical would probably be you being able to survive Lu Bu's betrayal, killing Lu Bu, and then going on from there to then fight all of the rest of the coalition as they've scattered to the winds and becoming a big threat to China. with his non-hypothetical, probably the way that could go is have it so that Lu Bu defeats him, kills him, and then you're forced to join probably Lu Bu, or you run away and potentially join one of the other factions after that point. So you would then run away, and since you want to be far away from Lu Bu, you would end up in the Sun clan, so you would end up with Wu in that circumstance. I think that'd be an interesting way to do that. Or potentially you ran to Yuan Shu, and that's how you ended up joining the Sun clan, because they were under Yuan Shu at that point. Then with Yuan Shao, you could have it so that his big moment is Guandu, the Battle of Guandu, where everything happens to him and he has a terrible time. You could have his hypothetical be that you saved his two generals from Guan Yu, Wen Chao and Yi Liang, I think, or Yan Liang. I don't remember their names, but those two. And because of that, Zhang Ha never betrays and like joins the Wei Force or anything like that. And you can beat the Wei Force, and potentially the hypothetical could be a fun thing where you end up in the Battle of Chibi on the side of like what Wei would have, but it's Yuan Shao, and because of the fire attack, he's just like, okay, I just survived a big trap with my supplies. You think this is going to bother me? And then he just like has his forces charge even though they're freaked out and like their morale is down, which then messes with the people of the Shu and Wu. I think that would be a really fun way to go with that. But then if he ends up losing and you have the non-hypothetical historical route, you could have it so you're forced to join the Wei faction at that point. And then there's the last two that I think would be interesting, which are, with Yuan Shao's faction, I think the two people who would be most likely to be companion characters would probably be Zhenji and Zhang Ha. And then you can have it so that you've got companions throughout all of the battles and everything. With Yuan Shu now, I think it would be interesting. He doesn't really have any officers that are under him that are then unique models or companions. And I think that it would be interesting if during the coalition you join him. His historical route is his big battle with all of the different people, and you're trying to help and defeat the rest of the people going against him, which are like Lu Bu's faction, Wei's faction, Wu's faction. Shu is under Lu Bu at that point. So like all of the different factions are fighting him, and then you're forced to join one of those at the end. I think probably most likely Wu, because Wu were the people who were subordinate to him. So they'd be like, hey, we worked with you for a while. We want to make sure that you are protected, so we'll take you under our wing kind of thing. I think that'd be interesting. Then you could have it so that with his hypothetical route, it starts with the battle where he and Sun Jian do not get along with the Shishui Great, and he didn't send supplies to Sun Jian, but you could have it so that since you've joined him, you then wait until Sun Jian is defeated and then take over that section and like take that glory for Yuan Shu, because I think that would be such an interesting twist, is having it so it's like, yeah, his more evil impulses that potentially broke apart the coalition are the things that he's now getting rewarded for, and then you have it so that he defeats Deng Zhuo and you take back the emperor to Yuan Shu, and he potentially just grows in power and has his power base growing as he first defeats Wu and then has a major battle against Liu Bei and Cao Cao somewhere in the north after he's like taking everything back. Potentially an invert map of like Luoyang, where you are going through Hulao Gate, but you are defending Hulao Gate against the forces of Shu and Wei. I think that would be an interesting way to do it. Yeah, you wouldn't really have a companion for that one. I don't know what you would get for that one, honestly, for like weapons or anything. But I think that would just be a fun faction to do. And then the last one I think would be interesting would be a faction for Wang Yun, which that faction, instead of having it so that it is a faction that is interested in taking their own power, they would be more into assassinations and such. So you'd have a lot of smaller battles where you are going into places to kill people who Wang Yun thinks are threats to China and the stability of the emperor and his position. So potentially you go out and like before the Battle of Guandu, you assassinate Cao Cao and you assassinate Yuan Shao, and you then go and defeat Liu Bei, and you just go through and defeat all of these people in the hypothetical, where then you gain the power of like the emperor at the end, but it's actually the emperor of China who takes over all of China, because Wang Yun doesn't have the interest in taking over and like being the person in charge of China. He just kind of retires and goes back to his position of being more of an assassin type. That one you could gain the companion of Dao Chen, which I would be very happy about, because that would be great. And then for his non-hypothetical, you would have it so that he ends up getting assassinated like in the story, and then you're just kind of stuck at square one, where you then have kind of made it so other factions don't like you. And that could be an interesting way, is like if that one actually ends prematurely because you're assassinated with him. I think that would be really fun and really interesting as a direction, because not all of these have to end in a good way for Ziluan. I don't think, at least. Those are my thoughts on the DLC and what they could potentially do with it. I wonder what you guys have thought of. Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. And I hope you guys are just as interested and excited for this DLC on the 22nd of January. I'm hoping that it's a bigger one, that we do get more than just the yellow turbans. If it is just the yellow turbans, I hope we get future DLCs. And yeah, I hope that you guys have a wonderful day.